everyone. Welcome to another session of my Fearless Media podcast series and Creative University series for young people, primarily in college, who are trying to figure out their lives and learn the world of media and entertainment and tech. And today I have a very special guest, Dean Karnazes, ultramarathon man, but so much more, as I said in my introduction already, and we're going to dig into that. So Dean, welcome.
Talk about figuring out your life. I'm still trying to figure out mine. So
tell me about it. I'm right there with you.
I think that if we can, view the world through the eyes of a child, I know that's kind of cliche, but even as we get older, I think that, continuing to grow keeps us fresh and keeps us young. I think that, a lot of studies have shown that most people acquire knowledge up to about the age of 30, and then they just apply that knowledge for the rest of their life. And I don't want to be one of those people.
Yeah, I hear you. And there's no question. And you've always been an inspiration to me. And I have to tell people out there kind of how I first met you, and that I'm fortunate to call you a friend, and because we've known each other for a long time. But really quickly, I'm wearing an NYU running shirt for a couple of reasons. First, I'm trying to keep up with Dean because he's the most incredible runner who's inspired me forever, and I'll never keep up with him. But I'm wearing a running shirt out of just pure respect. The torch of NYU, the NYU torch, you've carried the Olympic torch at least twice, correct?
Twice. Yep. Yeah, twice.
Yeah, and then I just moved my son into NYU Film School just last weekend before the torrential floods of this weekend. So lots of reasons. And as I told you, Creative University is also geared toward the students out there. And so this is a shout out to them. But like Dean, I'm going to ask you a question, but just for everybody out there, the way I met Dean in the first place was as a fanboy, essentially. I was at a dinner party, and I've been a long time runner, but miles and miles, but not hundreds of miles. And I'm always amazed by people who amaze me are people who do what I consider to be unfathomable, just blow my mind sort of things. And I was at a dinner party one night with friends, and we were talking about, he had just read your book, your ultramarathon book, man book, Confession of an All-Night Runner. And he told me about one of your superhuman feats of strength, running 50 miles, 50 marathons in 50 consecutive days in 50 states, in all 50 states. And I told my friend, there's no way. There's absolutely no way. There's no way somebody could do that. Of course, I looked into it and saw that, oh, yes, there's some way, apparently, and that you have done so much more than that. And so I just blindly, I reached out to you because I wanted to talk to you, meet you, and learn your story, and maybe help in my own little way, tell your story, spread the story around the globe even more, even though you already are worldwide. So anyhow, that's my background, Dean, but it's great to see you, and thanks for being part of this.
Yeah, I can't remember the circumstances why I accepted your invitation, because this is way before social media. But there was something you said. I don't know if it was a text or an email. Some way you phrased it. I thought this guy seems kind of cool. Like, because I get a lot of invitations to meet with people, and usually they're I don't take them up on it. But thankfully I did, because it has led to a long-standing friendship.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember I was coming home from a business trip in the Bay Area, and it was in the nighttime, and I just read cover to cover. I read your book, the Ultramarathon Man book. And I came back, and it was like 11 o'clock at night on a Friday night. And my wife was sleeping next to me, and I couldn't sleep. And I put on my running shoes, and I hadn't run, 13 miles. I was running probably 3-4 miles at that time. That night, I ran 13 miles, and it was magical, but because I was so inspired by you, Dean. But I came back, and I started, as I lied down, my whole body just cramped up. So thank you for that.
I'm glad we're still friends. Yeah.
Yes. So Dean, before we get into more background, you have just come back from your latest feats of strength in Australia. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's another ultra marathoner in Australia that I really admire, and his name is Pat Farmer. and he invited me to come run a race in Australia, 1,000-mile race as a 4-person relay team. So he said, let's get a team together of 4 Australians, two men and 2 women, and 4 Americans, and let's do a relay race and call it 1,000 miles to light. And literally, we ran 1,000 miles, kind of crawling out of the COVID light, but also finishing at the Byron Bay Lighthouse. So symbolically, actually touching the lighthouse as the finish. And it was a fundraiser for an organization called Reach Out Australia, which helps young people and youth deal with mental health issues, which are rampant in Australia at the moment. And I used to live in Australia. I went to high school there. I was an exchange student. So I thought, you know what, I owe it to the Australian people to get back there and do what I can. And that was the genesis of 1,000 miles to light.
Well, that's amazing. And you mentioned mental health issues that the globe is facing, and young people, everybody, but young people, I think in particular. And that was the impetus for Creative University, just looking at all the the time, the socialization that they're away from, the whether it's bonding with others, meeting others, dating others, all of that. And so that's really a beautiful thing that you did. How do you feel both mentally and physically after that? Because you ran what, 250 miles yourself?
Yeah, and it was the format itself was kind of bizarre in that it was each day every runner ran 25 miles, but in 5K increments, so about 3.1 mile increments. So you'd run 8 times throughout the course of the day, as fast as you could. And so it's kind of daunting physically, but I think emotionally for me it was tricky because there was a mandatory 2-week quarantine getting into Australia. And like you, I'm a California kid. I'm an outdoors guy. I've never gone any time in my entire life being inside for 2 weeks. Never.
Yeah.
And it was really challenging to get through that, Peter. There were days where I thought I was losing it.
Well, so what did quarantine look like down there?
It Australia is controlling COVID in a much different way than America. You have to understand societally, the culture of Australia is very different than here. One, it was it's a Commonwealth country, so it was it was settled by the British, and they're still very proper, if you will. So they're managing COVID by just literally locking down entire states in Australia. And when I say lockdown, that means you cannot go beyond 5 kilometers of your house or 3 miles of your house, period. And they will issue a ticket. They pull people over that are on the road and check their ID and see where they live, and they'll issue a ticket if you're beyond 5 kilometers from your house. So they're very serious about it. And they've done a great job controlling COVID, but it's come at a huge toll because, with those hard lockdowns, kids are isolated. Everyone is isolated, and it creates a lot of mental health problems and emotional problems. So that's kind of the trade-off, the way they're approaching it. The other thing that you have to understand about Australians is that they tend to, there's a lot of national pride. So when they say stay inside, the prime minister comes on and says, be Australian, do the right thing. And people do. And, there was one protest, and the police commissioner came on, on the TV every day and said, we will not tolerate protest. Do not protest. And no one protest. Can you imagine a police commissioner in the US?
No.
Saying on television, do not I mean, there'd be riots. So
There would be.
Culturally, it's very different. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's really a beautiful thing, actually. It's a really beautiful thing. But for you, as you were saying, you've never been locked in a place for 2 weeks straight. So were you physically in a small area?
Oh yeah, Peter. I mean, physically in a small hotel room that
Oh,
did not have windows that opened. So breathing recirculated air, and the protocol is really intense. You essentially 3 times a day, there's a knock on your door. You wait 30 seconds, you put on a mask, you open your door wide enough to pull in a white paper bag. Inside that bag is your meal. Deal with it. That's what you get. And I mean, I could go on and on about the craziness of it, but a lot of it was food that I just don't eat. And I remember I asked for like a chicken breast, and I kept getting these chicken breasts and gravy. So I'd rinse them off in the sink, trying to get all the fatty gravy off it. And then they gave you bamboo utensils. And I mean, I can't tell you how many bamboo knives I broke trying to chop this chicken breast.
Oh God,
Yeah, it
Dean, I
was,
can't. I've known you long enough where I can't even imagine you. I can't imagine myself being in that situation for 2 weeks in a hotel room and essentially trapped in there. And for a guy like you, where it's the outdoors is everything, right? The great wide open is everything for you.
oh, it was, yeah. And, I did things like, I made a commitment that I would not sit down from the moment I got out of bed. I would not sit down until I got back into bed that night. So everything was standing up. And I've learned some tricks through my travels. Like I pull out the ironing board, and that's my stand-up desk, because I'm a writer. So I do all my writing, my correspondence while I'm standing up. And, one day I said, okay, my goal for today is to do 500 burpees. So I did, 10 sets of 50 burpees throughout the course of the day. I tried to set these little goals every day, just
Yeah, yeah.
some reason to crawl out of bed.
Well, okay, I should be standing up right now, actually, and sitting down doing this interview. But that's listen. Welcome back. It's great to see you back in on domestic soil. And let's talk about let's get into the beginning of your journey before understanding how you do what you do and why you do what you do, because I want to get into that. Now, your journey is pretty well documented in your first book, and then it extends into others. But it's a wonderful book out there, everybody. You should all read it, whether you're a runner or not a runner. It's just the story itself is cinematic. And there will be a film based on that book. I've no doubt about that. And so, but for those people out there who don't know it, just like really kind of quickly, not the entire story, but because you were a runner throughout your life in high school, but then you kind of hung up your shoes for a while, and you're going to have to read the book to understand why. But there was something that pivotal that happened to you on your 30th birthday. So if you could just give a little bit of background on that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I used to love to run when I was younger. I quit running when I was 15. Graduated high school somehow, graduated college somehow, graduated graduate school somehow, graduated from business school. I got an MBA somehow, and I had a very comfortable job in San Francisco. And on the night of my 30th birthday, I was in a bar doing what a lot of people do on their 30th birthday. I was in there drinking with my buddies. And at midnight, I told them I was leaving. And they said, well, let's have another round of tequila to celebrate your 30th birthday. And I said, no, I'm going to run 30 miles to celebrate my 30th birthday instead. And they looked at me. They said, but you're not a runner. You're drunk. And I said, I am drunk, but I'm still going to do it. And Peter, I'll never forget. I walked out of this bar, and I didn't even own running gear, but I had on these kind of comfortable silk boxer shorts, these silk underwear. So I took off my pants and threw them down the alleyway and just started stumbling into the night heading south, knowing that Half Moon Bay was 30 miles away. And I just said, yeah, let's just run to Half Moon Bay tonight. And that night forever changed the course of my life.
It really did. And so when you define it that way, it changed the course of your life. What happened during that run where you had your own personal aha moment? And what was that aha moment?
Well, I think that something had been percolating within inside me. I kind of followed the prescription for happiness, at least in the U.S. or in Western culture. Get a good education, get a good job, get a fat paycheck, and happiness follows. And I had all these things, and happiness wasn't following. I was empty inside, and I remember the intensity that running brought to me. That how much it made me feel alive, and I just wanted to do something that really pushed me. And everything was so comfortable up to that point. I wanted something really uncomfortable to stir my life up, and I think that was part of the impetus. The other thing is that my wife wasn't much of a partier, so she had gone home, and a good friend of ours started hitting on me, and I was getting drunk, and she was actually really gorgeous, and I'm looking in her eyes, and she's looking in my eyes, and I'm like, is this really where you want your life to go? Are you going to end up 50 years old on your third wife, bald, out of shape, driving a red sports car? I kind of saw the writing on the wall. I'm like, that is not the life I want. And I think all of those things kind of came together like a perfect storm, and off I ran.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's one of those moments where you could go one way or the other, and your life could be very different than it is today. And you're you're not bald. You have a wonderful head of hair, so I envy that about you. You're incredibly
Not
fit.
that.
You're incredibly fit and healthy, which is insanely fit and healthy. You have your same one wife, and you are inspired. Not only do you find new ways to inspire yourself and motivate yourself in new experiences like Australia and everything you went through, the good, the bad of it, but also that you find new ways to inspire millions and millions of people around the world in a positive kind of sense. And I really respect all of that. And because you started getting into that, let's talk about the whys first, and then get into the hows of what you do, because you described a little bit about your motivation why. But then as you moved on from your 30th birthday to where you are today, you've created a path that is motivated by certain things. And so describe how you went from, okay, you had this comfortable office job, you had this aha moment, but then you took a next step, which really made it real to doing what you're doing. And then another step, until you've built this legend of who you are. What was the whys of, you described a little bit, but lay that out a little bit more about the whys of doing what you do and how you continue to challenge yourself, like the whys that push you to define things in a certain way.
Yeah, I mean, it all came together very organically. Like, it wasn't really scripted, but after running 30 miles that night, I started getting into ultra marathoning. And for the audience, what is an ultra marathon? It's anything beyond a 26.2-mile marathon. But not only did I get into ultra marathoning, I got into ultra marathoning these extreme distances and extreme elements, like running 135 miles nonstop across Death Valley, running a marathon to the South Pole, running a 12-person 200-mile relay race solo, just as a team of one. And I love these things. I mean, it's what enthralled me. It's what made me feel most me. And so I thought I want to pursue this as as my life. But I kind of scanned the horizon, scanned the landscape and said, well, even if you win these races like you have, what do you get? There's no prize money. You get a nice trophy, you get a belt buckle, but how are you going to sustain yourself, running ultra marathons? So I kind of used my business degree to say, okay, you need different silos of income to support yourself. And one of those might be storytelling through writing books. And I wrote my first book, and Ultra Marathon Man: Confessions of an All-Night Runner, and it became an instant New York Times bestseller. And it's now, I think it's in print in 21 languages. It's sold close to 1 million, I think over 1 million copies at this point. And so that really launched things. I thought, there's power in this message. Not everyone wants to run, 135 miles nonstop across Death Valley in the middle of summer, and have their shoes melt off. But people enjoy the storytelling around it. It's vivid, and it's inspiring. And that's kind of how things came to be. That's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully it addresses what you were asking.
No, it's not long-winded at all. There's so much underlying complexity to what you said. It sounds very simple, but there's the reason why your story resonates to millions, and you've inspired so many, whether they're runners or not, whether they're super athletes or not, is because it's kind of the, these challenges and the universality of looking at yourself, looking at your life. What is it that inspires you? What is it? What motivates you? What really matters? All those kinds of things. And that's why I think your story is amazing in so many different respects, is because of the universality of it. And that's why it would be the ideal kind of movie or film or whatever it may be. And so it resonates to people of all kinds. And you were talking about, okay, you enjoyed being out in nature, yes, but even deeper than that, from your own psyche, what do you think it is about being in those moments of running or preparing for running, and what it's done for you to optimize your own like fulfillment from a life perspective? Like, what is it about that that has had this impact on you?
I mean, one thing to me, running represents so many things. It's a very simple act, right? Running, but it's profound. It's a way to escape. It's escapism. It's, reconnecting with being human. I mean, when we run, we're basically our elemental selves as we've evolved. It's also, immersion in nature. I mean, I'm much more comfortable, running off in the mountains for 4 or 5 hours than I am around people. I don't mind being by myself. I kind of enjoy it, actually. I kind of enjoy immersing myself in nature. And the other thing that has been so rewarding to me is, to your earlier point, I mean, I have, wow, tens of thousands of letters, of handwritten letters that I keep every one of them, and emails from people. And a lot of, literally a lot of the first sentence is, you changed my life. Thank you. And I can't personally think of anything that would have more meaning to me than that. It's, you can't monetize that. I mean, you can't say, if I was a gazillionaire, I'd be more satisfied. I wouldn't. For me to be able to inspire and empower others, and give others the permission to live their best life, that's kind of like the highest calling to me. So somehow I've achieved that, and it's been really fulfilling.
Listen, I think that in that point, and it's something that comes across not in all of the interviews that I do, but certainly in my own personal feelings about life. And I guess this is a little bit confessional, but for people who are out there, there's always going to be this pull about what really matters to you and how important are things like the comforts of money, the security of money, that sort of thing, which is all understandable. I mean, everybody has to take care of themselves and their families and, the things that matter to them. But like you said, you had this cushy, comfortable job. You were living the dream. You had this professional job and you were doing really well at it, but you realized it kind of like, and you thought maybe even that you were happy, but there was a realization where something wasn't right. And you found the solace of it all in the path you chose, which you did it without a net, no security, really. And you perhaps could be making a lot more money if you stayed in the corner office sort of thing. I'm sure you're doing great, but you know what I mean? It's everybody out there who's listening to this, and you young people who are out there listening to this, society is always, we feel like we have to live a certain kind of storyline frequently because that's pushed upon everybody. And Dean, you were saying that too. There's kind of certain things that, like dots, that we are expected to follow, journeys we're expected to follow, but man, you blaze your own trail. And that's the beauty. So especially for you young people out there, there is no one right path. And so one of the things, Dean, that I always say in the Creative University sessions is don't feel like you have to have it all figured out on day one, because I certainly don't. Like you said, you certainly don't. And it's okay. It's what motivates you and how important, like you got to set your own priorities. And that's one of the reasons why I really wanted you to be a guest here, because you live that.
Well, I think at the end of the day, what really matters, I think that when you look at your life and especially your vocation, which is so much of your life, one, is it fulfilling? And two, is it meaningful? And if you can say yes to both of those, you're going to be very happy in your job. If you can't say yes to both of those, you're going to be a little less satisfied in your job. And I think that's kind of a universal truth for anyone.
And you'll be a better person if you're more personally fulfilled. You'll be able to be more fulfilling to others as well.
And if you run, you'll be a better person. My wife tells me that all the time. Like, you need to go for a run. When I come back in the door, you're a better person now.
Yeah. Well, it's getting out in nature is a great thing. If not, at least the pandemic has perhaps opened those kind of eyes to a lot of people too.
Yeah, and I always say motion stirs emotion. So I mean, for your creative side, there's nothing like exercise and especially running to get the juices flowing.
So Dean, when you're running, and I've never asked you this question, where's your mind, where's your head with every step that you take?
It depends on the particular run, but one thing I do a lot of is writing while I run. I'm a writer, and I think I have some of my clearest thoughts when I'm running. I think anyone would agree with that. And so I dictate into my phone now when I'm running. I'm word crafting, thinking of passages. Really, it's time when you can just think to yourself when you're running. I mean, Peter, let's face it. Throughout the course of the day, how much alone time do you get to really think? Just think, free form think for an hour or two by yourself. It just doesn't happen. But if you go running without earbuds, and you have your own time, and you can really do some deep work, much more so than if you're distracted like we typically are through the course of a day.
That's interesting. So you don't run with music or podcasts?
No, I once in a while I do, and I also listen to a lot of audiobooks. I think I have 500 audiobooks on my playlist now. So I listen to audiobooks, but a lot of times I don't. I just run just for the pure joy of running itself.
God, that's interesting. And so you're with you've run so much. Have you ever tallied in your mind roughly how many miles you've run?
I'm sure it's over 100,000 miles.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I've run. I counted my medals the other day, and I've got over 300 just regular marathon medals. So I've run over 300 just standard marathons, and then the ultra marathons is probably easily as much.
that's crazy. That's amazing. That's amazing. So is every run fresh to you? Like, is every run a new experience for you that is enjoyable? And I ask this because running, to me, I enjoy it. And there are occasions when I get really inspired. And usually it's in the very early morning hours where it's dark out and then the sun starts rising. And I have the PCH, the Pacific Coast Highway here, and I'm literally running in the middle of it. And Dean, I can almost like think of you doing those kinds of things, like running in the middle of a road, but you're usually in a forest or something. But like, those are the moments where it's really inspirational to me. But I got to tell you that most of the time running is kind of utilitarian to me. I enjoy it, but there are a few times when I'm really like loving every step I take. So tell me about your headspace.
I mean, I am just like you, Peter. There's some days when I love running, some days when I'm neutral to it, and other days I really hate it. That's why I think we say we have a relationship with running, and that's what a relationship's all about. There are good moments and not so good moments. For me, sometimes I have these training blocks where every run is quantified and every run has a purpose. There's a goal for each run, and I try to achieve that goal and stay on my training and my hitting all the milestones I try to hit as I'm building up for something. Other times when I'm not doing that, I don't even know what route I'm going to go on. A lot of times I'll just put on a hydration pack, throw some food in there, and just be gone for 4 or 5 hours, and just wander. I mean, thankfully you've seen where I live, and I have amazing access to all these, this trail network around Marin County, where just north of San Francisco. So I have the privilege of being able to do that, and I do it. I literally just get out there, and sometimes I go all night, Peter. I come home in the morning.
And then I want to get into the how you do what you do. But when you are on a cross-country run, like the one run that you did, I think 3,000 miles in about 70 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and you were on national television checking in every day. I think it was Good Morning America. So it's not like you could miss a day because you are being followed, and it's an event that's based around you. So there's a hell of a lot of pressure on you. and you're in tremendous pain because you're running every day 40 plus miles, 40 plus miles, nearly getting on almost 2 marathons a day. How do you wake up the next day and just put on your shoes and get the motivation to continue on that journey when you're in tremendous pain and you're mentally, you may not be there, you may not have slept all night? Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you're very perceptive and noting the pressures on me when I did that. It was a run across America. So it was from Los Angeles to New York City, and it was on live with Regis and Kelly. So they were filming it, and it was a run, but it was on a production schedule. So I had to hit certain, some days I had to run over 50 miles to get to where we're going to be filming the next day. The other thing is, they had sold these multi-million dollar advertising packages that were dependent on 75 days of television programming around this guy running across the country. If I was to fail, there'd be no programming. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of pressure there. And there were certainly many days where I'm like, I can't even get out of bed. I can barely make it to the sink in the hotel room. How am I going to run 50 miles today? But what I did is I learned to not think, essentially, just to be in the present moment of time, the here and now. So I didn't think about what had to come throughout the course of the day. I didn't reflect on the past. I just said, be the best that you can be right now. And sometimes that meant just get out of bed, go splash some water on your face in the sink. Okay. Go make some of that lovely in-room coffee. Have a cup of coffee. Okay, put on one short leg at a time. All right, lace up your shoe. And literally I would just be in the here and now. And it was almost like a Zen-like state some days where I'm not thinking about anything in the future. I'm just being the best Dean that Dean can be at that very moment.
Tell me about that Zen-like state.
Yeah, I mean, if you can put yourself in the here and now, and it does take some discipline because our minds are very active, aren't they? I mean, even now when we're interacting on this interview, you probably got 1,000 things going through your mind, and anyone listening to this probably does as well. If you can quiet your mind and really have the discipline to focus on what you're doing at that moment and that instant, life becomes very much more tolerable, if you will. The noise goes away, and all of a sudden there's kind of this calmness and this sense of purpose that is unique.
So did you train yourself, or have you always been that way, where you're able to be in that moment and forget the pain, essentially?
You know what I did, Peter? I started looking at, inevitably when you do an ultra marathon, you're going to hit the wall. I mean, there's going to be a point where you have the, come to Jesus moment where you say, I can't go on. Like this one's crushed me, and that might be 75 miles into a 100-mile foot race. And somehow I'm able to carry on beyond that. So I looked at, how are you able to get back up when you think all hope is lost? And I realized what I was doing is I wasn't thinking about the finish line. I was blanking that out. I was just saying, just get up and, get to the next tree on the side of the trail. Okay, get to the next turn in the trail. Don't think about the finish. Just think about making it 10 feet up the road and piecing that together. And that's kind of a way that I got to the finish. And so I started applying that to my life in general.
So what do you do? Let's just specifically on running and then life, but specifically on running or any sort of physical activity, hitting the wall. But let's say your body is just, you're fully cramped up or whatever it may be. Because I'm sure these things, your body has failed you on several occasions. I mean, many occasions during these crazy things. How did you mentally, I understand what you just described to me, but how did you overcome the physical constraints of that to be able to get up and finish?
Well, I'll tell you that the human body is remarkable. And there are times where I thought I can't get out of this chair and I've got to run another 40 miles to get to the finish. And I got to the finish. So how does a human body recuperate in the way it does? I think that a lot of us don't push our body to its limit. that we're held back, I think, mentally. We have limitations in our mind. And I think if you can bust through those limitations, you start to learn through experience that my body's more resilient than I give it credit for. And I can get up and I can at least walk. And a lot of times just walking for 40 or 50 feet, you start to feel better and you start to recuperate. And it's almost comical. It's almost like watching a stupid Hollywood movie where, someone gets blown up and all of a sudden 15 seconds later they're, fighting again. But
Yeah, yeah.
the body is remarkable. Yeah.
But
Very resilient. Yeah.
but do you believe that everybody it has that same kind of body resiliency, or do you believe that you're like a superhuman physical specimen?
I think everybody can have that resiliency, but you have to train. I mean, when I hit those rough spots, you're gonna turn inward and you're gonna look and evaluate who you are. And when I do that, I say, okay, Karnazes, you have paid your dues. You have worked your ass off every single day. You cross train. Your diet is super regimented. Your sleep is high quality. Everything you've done has been through the filter of being the best animal that you can be. So you can do this. And I think that if people train as hard as I do, and you know, you've got to be passionate about it first of all, or else you're just not going to be able to keep up with the regimented, disciplined training and focus that it takes to do these things. But I think anyone can do it if they're passionate about it. I don't think I'm necessarily unique. Uh, you know, I am 100% Greek, and like I do have very good biomechanics
Yeah.
for a runner. The original marathoner was a Greek guy, Philippides. But other than the biomechanics, I don't think I'm gifted in any specific way.
And you've never really had, that I'm aware of, like teams of people who have been optimizing your training and doing all of that. You're kind of a you've always created that on your own. You may have, as you've, in preparation for certain things, have had some kind of team with you, but right, it's not like you had a technologists around the world who are trying to help it, like an Olympic training sort of years and years, something like that. You created this yourself. You inspired yourself. You got the mental toughness yourself, and this kind of feeling that you've been describing, right?
Yeah, I mean, but I did talk to a lot of people and I did read very widely. So, I
Mm-hmm.
always say, listen to everyone, follow no one. So I had coaches, I got advice from people and I kind of cherry picked what worked best for me. I have been sliced and diced and analyzed by scientists,
I'm sure.
but less so coached by scientists. I mean,
And what have they found when they sliced and diced you?
they found that I have good biomechanics, that I run exactly as a runner should. So, what's in vogue now to try to emulate as a runner is very quick foot turnover, so shorter, choppier steps, landing midfoot or forefoot, which I've always done. Having a slight lean forward and really accentuating your arm swing as you're running. I've been doing those things naturally throughout the course of my life, and now that coaches are saying this is how you should try to run. So I've always been doing that. They've also found that I don't accumulate lactic acid. Lactic acid is a byproduct of cellular respiration. Like imagine doing bicep curls, and you're curling a heavy weight, and all of a sudden you're feeling that burning, and you can't lift the weight any further. That's kind of the accumulation of lactic acid. And if you put down the weight, shake your arm out, wait for a couple minutes, you can pick it up and continue doing bicep curls until you fatigue again. I don't have that really happening so much. So they found that my ability to remove lactic acid from my system helps me run for long distances.
God, that's amazing. That's amazing. So there is from just a pure genetics standpoint, there is something rare about you too.
Well, there's a program called Stan Lee's Superhumans. Remember Stan Lee?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I know. I met Stan. Really good guy.
Yeah, I did too. But he had a show. It was called Superhumans, and the premise of the show was he was sending a group of scientists around the world to interview people that supposedly had superhuman powers, and to test them and either debunk, they don't have that power, or wow, there is something here. And when they did the lactate threshold test at a lab, at the Human Performance Lab at UCSF in San Francisco, they said it'll take about 15 minutes to do this test. And 2 hours later, they're like, God, you're still going.
Who is this guy?
I finally said, I got to go pick my son up from school. Like, I got to go. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
So,
I bet.
yeah.
No, Stan Lee was an amazing guy. What a creative force, right? What an amazing creative force, and a really gentle guy. Really, we're talking about the same Stan Lee, the Stan Lee,
The comic book legend.
comic
Yeah.
legend.
I met him when he was 94, and he was still energetic as ever.
Yeah, I met him just a couple of years ago, and we were doing actually a business deal together, and just the nicest guy, greatest guy.
Very genuine, yeah.
So, Dean, when you're not running, what do you enjoy? Just, I'm curious, a couple of things that you look forward to.
Well, I love to read, and I'm Greek, so I love to read ancient Greek.
Huh.
I love to garden. I have an herb garden, Peter, that's amazing. And I keep up my herb garden, and I use fresh herbs in almost every meal I prepare. Other than that, I'm very much an introvert. I mean, even being on this interview is uncomfortable for me. So I spend a lot of time just with my family.
Yeah.
I have friends, but I have a few very deep relationships, which is very typical of an introvert.
Yeah.
So I don't spend too much time on social media. I mean, I've got to spend a bit of time just because I have a pretty big fan base, but I'm not overwhelmed or totally prisoner to social media.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really good thing.
I used to travel about 250 days a year. So, to me, the traveling was very exciting, and it's starting to come back online now. Next week, I'm heading to Greece for a month and a half. So I'm looking forward to that.
What you just said also, I think, is really important for people out there to understand, because there are, especially in the age of social media, there's all these things of what I think people believe is the optimal life or the ideal life, or I should be more like this, or I should be more like that. But as Dean, as you were saying, you're an introvert yet, and that's part of the reason why you do what you do. And that's where you get your energy, right? On your own when you're doing, that's what defines an introvert. I'm many ways like that. You and I've talked about that before, where I'm very public, but I'm very comfortable in this kind of setting and everything. But at the same time, I think it's surprising to many people is that I have no problem being on my own. I get a lot of energy from doing that too. I think that is part of the reason why running kind of appeals to me. But yet you were able to, despite that, you're a media figure. You're in the national news, international news all the time. You're always being interviewed. You write your books that are very public, and you're out there talking about them. So you have overcome your own not issues, but you know what I mean? You've accepted who you are and overcome what you may have believed are some limitations of yourselves and found a way to make it work. And I think that's really important for everybody to understand there, that nobody has it all. Everybody has a certain, things that are natural and unnatural. And that's part of the challenge of life. And that's part of the beauty of life, is challenging yourselves to overcome some of these things. And you may surprise yourself, and you've built a business, a lifestyle, and a business. You've made it work, and you've created it without a roadmap to do that. Like, you've just created it. And a lot of that has required extrovertish kind of things, so that too is a really important part of your journey that is inspirational, I think, to many people.
Well, it's been challenging, Peter. It's something it didn't come easy. It's something I really work at. And I think the term for us is called an ambivert, like an ambidextrous person. So we can turn on an extrovert side of us that we really turn on, essentially. And then, I personally, that's why I run. I mean, when I go do these book talks and book signings, for me, signing books for 3 or 4 hours is exhausting.
Yeah,
And all I could think about toward the end is, all right, when this is over, you can go run for 3 or 4 hours and get your energy back. But
right.
yeah,
But again, you kind of probably get into a Zen-like state. Right? Rather than thinking about, oh, this is going to be 3 hours of book signing, you just try to focus your mind on the present and enjoying the moment. And is that what you mean by Zen-like state? And is that part of it?
that's what I try to do, because these book signings, runners are very personal, and my story touches people in a certain way, and it's almost like a confessional in a lot of ways. I mean, people come up to me and they say, "Wow, I was struggling with alcohol or suicidal, and I read your book, and it changed my life." To digest something like that to me is really heavy. Like you can't just say, oh, "Okay, bro, next, who's next?"
Yeah,
It
yeah,
really,
that's right.
yeah. So when I finish a book signing, I'm kind of like, oh man, I need to go run. It's kind of overwhelming for me. I internalize a lot of it, and maybe that's the nature of an introvert.
So Dean, you're talking about a lot of different things. You're talking about the mental issues involved, mental discipline, kind of grounding yourself, motivation, eating right, sleeping, all of it, all of the wellness, right? Overall wellness. I don't even know this. Do you have an app or do you have something like that? Because it seems to me that you'd be a natural to have like the Dean Karnazes app that is kind of a holistic. It's not a runner's app. It's not like Runkeeper. It's a little of everything. Do you have anything, or have you ever thought about that?
No, it's an interesting idea. I don't even know of an app that exists like that. I think I give people a kind of a taste of that just on social media. I think that's why people follow me, because I mean, why else would you follow me? Like, I don't have a podcast I'm promoting. I have books certainly, but once you hear about my books, you hear about my books. There's nothing new there. So I think that I offer people a glimpse of, all of those elements you just discussed, as well as some fun elements and some irreverent elements that I think that's why people follow me on social media.
And where should they go check that out?
I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, on Twitter. I mean, someone said if you Google Dean, I'm the first Dean that comes up. So I mean, I'm not hard to find, Peter. I've got a website and everything else. Yeah.
And everybody, you should go check it out because it's fascinating. So, like, Dean, what with all the things you did, you just came back from Australia. In the introduction, as I said, I identified just a handful of your things that blow my mind. But what is your next journey that you are that's either planned or that you're contemplating?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, I'm heading to Greece next week, and I'm going to run 10 marathons in 10 days to celebrate and commemorate the bicentennial of Greek independence. So they're all at historical battle sites. So I'm looking forward to that. And then, the 3 to 5 year plan is to do a run from the lowest point on Earth to the highest point on Earth. So to run from the Dead Sea to the top of Mount Everest. And that's something that is going to require a lot of logistics and a lot of planning, and it has all the elements that I really love.
I can't even like I couldn't imagine any of your other things, but you're going to go to Everest.
That's the plan, is yeah, the lowest point to the highest point.
Wow, Dean. Never cease to amaze me. When you do all this, because the logistics are so insane, who is your team to help you?
It's a team that I've kind of put together. I'm going to do it hopefully with another ultra marathoner, a guy by the name of Charlie Engel, who's a guy I've long respected, who's done some amazing. I mean, he's run across the Sahara, so he's done some amazing runs, and he's got contacts. I have very high level contacts at the U.S. Department of State, because I've been a U.S. athlete ambassador. So I'll rely on the U.S. Department of State, the UN for support, as well as private sponsors.
Yeah, look, incredible. I got to ask you one last human thing. Do you ever complain?
I slap myself when I do, because
Okay.
I was telling someone the other day that if I was to die tomorrow, I'd die with a smile on my face. You know, I've lived such a great, fulfilling life that if I went out tomorrow, I'd be very happy. I've got nothing to complain about, Peter.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thought. I mean, that's a beautiful thing to think about. Not the, not going away and off the planet, but
Yeah,
but
me
having
crying, yeah.
but having that kind of mental, that kind of feeling, internal feeling, that internal like sense of I'm putting it all out there and I'm doing what I love and I'm with the people I want to spend my time on the planet with. I'm in that, like that kind of headspace. And that's a great way, I think, to end this session, is to just think about what it is in our own lives that can bring us that, what Dean just described for himself, and setting your priorities toward that goal and really sucking the most of the marrow of life, the whole carpe diem thing, Dead Poet Society thing, that really has always spoken to me very much. But you're at the risk of gushing some more, because I could go on and on and on. It's everything that you do is so inspiring to me. And I try to, when I complain about the little things out there, or even some big things, is really stop myself to appreciate, get in the moment and appreciate what life has given me. And you're an inspiration to that, because like, are you kidding me? I'm tired from walking 2 blocks down the street, and this guy's going to go from the bottom of the Dead Sea to the top of Everest. Come on, So Dean, it's wonderful to have you. It's great for you to be a guest on this episode of the Creative University Session Fearless Media Podcast. And we're all going to be following the journey. Obviously, you and I continuously talk to each other, and I appreciate you supporting this and being part of this and inspiring all those minds out there.
Well, thank you. You're giving me the platform to do it. So thank you for everything you're doing, Peter. And I look forward to the next time we can share some footsteps together.
Absolutely.